All right, so here we are, NSCA Chapter 11, and we are now transitioning into uh, types of assessments that evaluate the performance of the person. And this will be broken out into several different presentations. I'm not going to try to cram all these into one. So I'll have one presentation for cardiovascular endurance, one for speed agility, one for muscle strength, power and endurance. Maybe I'll do those three all in one. We'll see. Then flexibility, it will be pretty short, and then posture alignment and motivation. Then I'll come back and do training load. So right now in this presentation, we're going to go ahead and jump on over to page 212 and get into cardiovascular endurance. Let me go ahead and tap over to 212 here. On page 212, they go into different tests, and these are some of the tests that we've done in our program. But they talk about general procedures for cycloergometer testing, and it's a matter of just understanding how to set up the test and how to set up the equipment to make sure that you have consistency in your testing and your evaluation. Getting back to our conversation from chapter 10 regarding validity and reliability in your testing. They then go into more specifics in terms of the YMCA cycloergometer test and how the YMCA cycloergometer test and how you actually have procedural steps that are slightly different, not slightly, but are different than other cycloergometer tests. And so you use these different tests and these different protocols, and you use these to evaluate your clients. Some are better than others, and some will be more well received than others. Some, quite frankly, are going to feel more clinical than others, and you just might not be able to utilize some of these tests in your current environment. But they talk about the procedure to go ahead and you start off, and if the person is less than 80 beats per minute, you have a workload that's this. 80 to 90 beats, your workload changes. 90 to 100 beats, the workload changes yet again. So it's based upon you have an initial workload of 3 minutes at 150 kilopounds, which is 150 kilograms per meter per minute, is another way of saying it. And you end up, after that initial 3 minute stage, that's when you evaluate the person's heart rate. And if it's below 80, that tells you that the workload's not high enough and you have to up the workload. If it is too much and the heart rate is above 100 beats per minute, then you know you can't increase the workload as much as you would, say, for somebody who is able to do the initial stage of 3 minutes, that you can jump up the intensity with them, but other people you can't because they just can't handle the workload. So you take that information, you plug and chug, you go through your ergometer test here, and you look at this. You have the different stages over here to the left, and you have the work rates that are presented here. This is a 23-year-old male client, 181 pounds, etc. And so they kind of lay this out. And I would urge you, if you're going to do this procedure with your clients, you craft a spreadsheet that looks a lot like this, right? So you have this nice professional looking spreadsheet, and you can kind of fill in the information as you're working with your client. And then you also have all your information right here to be able to do your calculations to actually administer the test correctly. Your client will appreciate it because you have all the information that you need to be able to work with them. Where this becomes quirky is if you want to implement this in, now you're starting to talk about like a plot chart in terms of trying to determine their level of fitness. I just don't do this test with people. I just don't administer this test with people because it's a little too complicated, but you can give it a shot if you want. The Austrian rhyming test is a little bit easier in terms of implementation and also interpretation of results. The procedures are different in terms of the workloads you're at, if you remember, and it's categorized by male or female. And then you have a cadence in terms of as you're pedaling on the bike and as the person is working at 50 revolutions per minute, depending on the workload they're working at, you evaluate heart rate and then you make adjustments thereafter. So it's similar to the YMCA, but the end result is much easier to interpret in terms of how you take that information and you process that, and then you use information on table 1114 there to be able to interpret your results. They then get into a YMCA step test, which is incredibly easy. It's a field type test that you can do just right out in the field. You don't have to be in a laboratory, and you can do this pretty much anywhere on a gym floor, or, on a basketball court and be able to evaluate the results. And the person walks at roughly 96 beats per minute. And as they're doing the up, up, down, down, what ends up happening is they get done stepping for 3 minutes. And after the final step, they sit down, and within 5 seconds, you measure their heart rate for 1 minute. And then you compare the 1 minute recovery against values found in 1119. So you'll realize that you're kind of talking about a recovery component here because you're measuring and evaluating after the person is done. Word of caution, if you want to use these types of assessments, when you're working with people, especially if they're doing an activity, you're trying to take their pulse while they're doing the activity, that's inherently challenging. The YMCA step test, it becomes a little bit more convenient because they're actually not doing anything. They get done with the test and they're sitting down, which makes it a little bit easier for you to go ahead and take their pulse. With the 12-minute run walk, it's a field test designed to measure distance traveled over 12 minutes of running or walking. And so it's a matter of you just have to get on a 400-meter track, you have to mark out your spots, and you have to now be able to guide your client and make them understand that this is a 12-minute walk-run test. You can choose to walk or run, whatever you like. And then from there, we can use our calculations to be able to come up with what the person's VO2 max is. And notice it's an estimate of VO2 max. It's not actual. We don't have a mask on them and evaluating what they're doing through open circuit spirometry. 1.5 mile run. Measure time how long it takes a client to run 1.5 miles. Same thing. 400-meter track, and then you take the time, plug and chug, and then that gives you your answer for estimated VO2 max. With the 1.5 mile run, you have a little bit difference in terms of, if you'll notice, 12-minute run walk. You're running or walking for 12 minutes here. You may make 1.5 miles in 12 minutes. You might not. It just depends how fast the person runs. Just notice that one is for time, one is for distance. When we get in the Rockport walking test, this is usually for people who are a little bit older, maybe have some orthopedic concerns, they can't actually run. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy to administer. All you need is the ability to time the person and a place for them to walk that's actually pretty flat and pretty smooth. So you go ahead and have them walk, and then after they're done, you take the data points and plug and chug once again, and then that gives you an idea of their VO2 max. If we go ahead and go to the next page here on 222, one of the big differences you have and what you'll probably see on a test somewhere is you have the 1 mile run. The 1 mile run, it's more for cardiovascular endurance for children. Let me get myself out of the way there. 6 to 17. So notice the other assessments didn't really speak to the youth population. The 1 mile run is specific to the youth population in terms of the NSCA guidelines. And to that end, very similar. You need a stopwatch, you need a track, they run, how long does it take them to finish the actual 1 mile run? And then from there, you can go ahead and compare against normative values listed in page 1121. They note non-exercise based estimation of VO2 max. And with this, it's a little bit quirky, right? Because a person might be better conditioned than others, but what they state here is height in centimeters, body weight in kilograms, and age in years. Those are the things you need. And you go ahead and just plug and chug in the formulas. And from that information, you can come up with the person's VO2 max. And I would say to a point, right? You have to actually put some load into the system to get a response out of the system to see just how effective or efficient is another way to say it, the body is at being able to transfer oxygen to the blood and the CO2 out. And good, not great. The other ones are good as well. But again, this kind of gives you an idea of the different battery of tests that you can do more for the aerobic side of the equation. So to that end, I'm going to go ahead and pause 1 second. Okay, so I paused and I brought us back out to page 196 just to give an idea of what we went through. So we went through this section right here for this presentation. Next up will be speed and agility. All right, signing out.